In the ancient world, long before gold dominated the minds of merchants and silks captivated their imaginations, another commodity held sway over civilizations, a substance born from the arid, sun-scorched landscapes of southern Arabia and the Horn of Africa, the crystallized sap of a humble, thorny tree, incense, more specifically frankincense and myrrh. These aromatic resins were far more than simple air fresheners. They were the very scent of divinity, believed to bridge the gap between the mortal and the divine. When burned, their fragrant smoke ascended to the heavens, carrying prayers and offerings to the gods, a tangible representation of human devotion reaching for the ethereal. The demand for these sacred resins was insatiable and universal, stretching across vast empires and diverse cultures. In the grand temples of Egypt, priests burned copious amounts of frankincense in daily rituals to honor Ra, the sun god. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks and the Romans filled their temples and public ceremonies with its powerful aroma, believing it purified spaces and pleased their pantheon of deities. Myrrh, with its deeper, more bitter fragrance, was equally prized, not only for religious rites, but also for its use in medicine and, most famously, in the sacred and costly process of mummification, preserving the bodies of pharaohs for their journey into the afterlife. Possessing these substances was not merely an act of piety. It was a profound statement of power, wealth, and status. Monarchs and emperors demonstrated their immense riches by the sheer quantity of incense they could afford to burn. Funerals of the elite were marked by extravagant displays, with pyres consuming vast fortunes in fragrant smoke. The price of these resins often rivaled, and sometimes surpassed, that of gold, making them a luxury accessible only to the highest echelons of society. This intense, spiritually charged demand created a market of unprecedented scale, setting the stage for one of history's most remarkable commercial enterprises. This was a world where fragrance was currency, and control over its source meant control over a key pillar of religious and social life. The journey of these resins, from their remote origins to the altars of Rome and Alexandria, was a perilous and complex undertaking, requiring a network of immense sophistication to traverse some of the most unforgiving terrains on Earth. That network would come to be known as the Incense Road, a testament to humanity's determination to obtain what it deemed most sacred, no matter the cost or the distance, laying the foundation for the first true global supply chain. The immense value placed on frankincense and myrrh gave birth to a revolutionary system of trade, a fragrant artery threading through deserts and kingdoms. It would come to be known as the Incense Road, a lifeline of faith, wealth, and power. This was not a single paved highway in the modern sense, but a sprawling web of caravan trails. From the resin-rich hills of modern-day Yemen and Oman, the routes branched across Arabia, converging at oases and forts, and flowing onward to the ports of the Mediterranean. For centuries, this network connected east and west, transporting not only sacred resins, but also spices, ideas, cultures, and technologies. Markets rang with many tongues, harbours bustled as bales and amphorae changed hands beneath watchful officials. At the heart of it all were the caravans, massive convoys, sometimes thousands of camels, methodically plodding through a sea of sand. The journey was perilous. Blistering heat, sudden sandstorms, scarce wells, and the ever-present threat of raids by desert tribes. Success demanded far more than courage. It required intimate knowledge of the terrain, precise organization, and an iron grip on supply lines from source to market, from where to draw water to when to move to how to stagger the loads. One people rose to master this intricate web: the Nabataeans, a once nomadic Arab nation who forged a kingdom whose capital was carved into the rose-red cliffs of Petra. Hidden behind the narrow Sikh, Petra was both refuge and rendezvous, the desert's natural citadel. The Nabataeans did not produce the incense, they controlled its movement. They provided infrastructure, security, and expertise, the Amazon of their time, transforming danger into dependable delivery across vast, inhospitable distances. Their services were comprehensive: fresh camels and fodder, food stores and water, skilled guides and guarded passages. They brokered truces with neighbouring tribes, paying subsidies to keep the road safe, forging a predictable supply chain out of a hostile wilderness. Wealth flowed toward Petra. Precise taxes and tolls were levied, ledgers tallied the trade. From this hub, goods were dispatched west to the Mediterranean, north to Damascus, and south toward Egypt, all under Nabataean logistics and profit-sharing. Yet, beyond the dunes, another path beckoned: the sea. Along the Red Sea horizon, a maritime alternative emerged, one the Romans would seize to challenge the desert masters. The Nabataeans first enter the record as a nomadic Arab people of southern Jordan and northern Arabia, their fortunes carried not by fields but by herds, and by an unrivaled mastery of the desert itself. They knew its shifting sands, its ambush of canyons, and most importantly, the scattered secret wells that meant life or death. For generations they skirted the margins of empires, sometimes guiding caravans, sometimes raiding them, until the incense trade swelled into a river of wealth. In that moment they saw their calling, not merely to survive the desert, but to engineer it for commerce. They began with protection for a fee, then grew into something far more deliberate. Cisterns and reservoirs were carved into living rock to capture rare rains. Pathways were chosen for concealment and certainty. Caches were placed where only they would look. With water comes power in the empty quarter. By controlling hidden sources, the Nabataeans controlled movement itself, guiding caravans along routes invisible to rivals and perilous to would-be armies who marched without a Nabataean guide. Services multiplied into a seamless system: fresh camels and fodder, stores of grain and dates, expert pathfinders, armed escorts, and carefully purchased truces that made hostile lands strangely predictable. What began as escort became end-to-end logistics. Tolls and taxes were precise. Ledgers tallied the flow. Profits were shared on terms the desert masters understood. Out of uncertainty, they fashioned a supply chain that could be trusted across inhospitable distances. All roads converged on Petra, hidden behind the narrow Siq, a natural fortress transformed into a living metropolis. Here, the canyon walls became architecture. Tombs, temples, and public buildings carved from rose-red stone, a theatre of power and welcome. The genius of the city ran beneath the spectacle. Dams, channels, and cisterns captured every drop, watering gardens and sustaining merchants by the thousand. The desert's silence was replaced by the counting of goods. Frankincense and myrrh were graded and packaged. Spices were measured and rebagged, taxes were assessed with care. Petra was the ancient world's warehouse, secure, climate-controlled, and remarkably efficient. Here, cultures braided together. Nabataean Arabic beside Aramaic, the lingua franca of trade, and Greek upon stone. Art and architecture echoed distant shores, proof that caravans carry ideas as surely as they carry resin. From Petra, goods fanned west toward the Mediterranean, north to Damascus, and south toward Egypt. Each route managed, timed, and provisioned under Nabataean oversight. Wealth flowed toward the city like water down a channel. For centuries, this mastery made Petra a global, commercial centre, its prosperity built on knowledge, organisation, and the fragrant smoke that sanctified temples from Gaza to Alexandria. It was logistics raised to an art. The Nabataean monopoly was built not only on roads and walls, but on knowledge. Above all, the water that turned wilderness into weapon. Hidden cisterns carved into stone, remote wells masked by dunes, and rock-cut channels that captured rare rains were memorized, guarded, and never written down. To outsiders, the desert under Nabataean care became an impassable labyrinth, its lifelines known only to a trusted few. Secrecy was reinforced by story. In the markets of the Mediterranean, tales spread of winged serpents guarding frankincense groves and tribes who slew intruders on sight. Whether believed or merely feared, such legends served their authors. They cast the route in mystery and made Nabataean guidance seem not just useful, but indispensable. That illusion met its harshest test in 25 BC, when Aelius Gallus, prefect of Egypt, marched to seize Arabia Felix and its fragrant wealth. Guided by a Nabataean minister who feigned cooperation, the legions were led in circles, through dead wells, blinding heat, and desolate corridors of sand. Disease crept in, ranks faltered, standards tore, and an abandoned camp smouldered at dawn. The expedition failed long before it neared the incense lands, proof that might alone could not master the desert. Yet even as the Nabataeans perfected the land, another path widened: the sea. The Ptolemies of Egypt invested along the Red Sea, carving quays at Berenice and Myos Hormos, tying them by desert roads to the Nile, and from there to Alexandria's harbours. It was the first coherent maritime supply chain aimed at the incense world. Its secret was wind. For part of the year the monsoon blew south and east toward Arabia and India. For the other part it returned from the northeast, carrying ships home. Mastery of these seasons unlocked direct open water voyages past coral coasts, fewer tolls, shorter crossings, and holds that dwarfed the capacity of caravans. The Red Sea remained treacherous, reefs, fickle gusts, scarce shelter, but organisation turned hazard into habit. Ports provisioned, road crews relayed cargo to Nile barges, and warehouses timed departures with the sky. Profit, once borne by camels, now rode on the wind. When Rome took Egypt in 30 BC, it inherited the port's pilots and patterns. Roman eagles rose over Egyptian harbours, cargoes multiplied, and fleets set their course for incense shores. A maritime challenge to the desert masters that would, in time, erode their monopoly. At dawn, upon the Red Sea, Rome's sea lane took form. Calm swells, disciplined sails, and pilots who read the winds. This maritime artery would, in time, unseat the sands beneath the overland Incense Road. Quays thrummed with labour. Cargo moved from holds to desert roads, then onto Nile barges bound for Alexandria. This was logistics by tide and schedule, a network mapped, timed and provisioned to bypass the caravan gatekeepers. Against such capacity, camel lines grew thin on the horizons. Holds outmeasured panniers. Crossings outran caravans. The sea route rendered the overland path less critical, and demand drifted from sand to surf. Petra still impressed. The treasury's facade, colonnades in rose-red stone. Yet the hum of commerce softened. Slower ledgers, quieter courtyards, a capital built on transit now feeling the route slip away. Revenues from tolls and taxes waned. Ledgers tallied less. Coins and amphorae moved more slowly. Stalls sat empty as shadows lengthened across market walls. The economic base began to erode. In 106 AD, Trajan moved. Rome annexed Nabataea and redirected the caravan axis toward Bostra. Authority stamped in standards, roads and records. Petra's primacy dimmed under imperial order. Demand itself was changing. As Christianity rose, incense ceded its sacred centrality, and the empire's third-century crises thinned purses, curbing appetite for Eastern luxuries. Economics and devotion alike turned from the caravan's wares. Along the desert road, strain showed, weathered facades, thinned markets, fewer beasts at the wells. The great overland network, once the spine of belief and profit, began its long retreat. Petra adapted. Administration and agriculture steadied life under Rome. Later, a Christian city emerged, bishopric and church, its mosaics alive with seasons, oceans and creatures in glass-bright tesserae. In 1993, the Petra papyri surfaced, charred scrolls beside the church. Not chronicles of kings, but lives in ink. Marriages, property, taxes, agreements, the city's ordinary heartbeat preserved by fire. Then the earth shook. On May 19th, 363 AD, an earthquake shattered channels and toppled stone. The water system, Petra's lifeblood, broke, and with it, momentum faltered. Decline stretched across generations. Wind pressed dunes against facades. Courts fell silent. A few Bedouin families found shelter in tombs as the desert reclaimed its theatre of stone. In 1812, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised and determined, traced the canyon and revealed Petra anew. Today, travellers echo his wonder beneath the same rose-lit walls. In 2005, UNESCO honoured the Incense Route and the desert cities of the Negev, Haluza, Mamshit, Avdat, Shivta. The lesson endures. Networks raise empires, technologies reroute them. The Nabataeans' genius met open sea navigation, and history turned the page. Egypt, ancient, storied, and for centuries ruled by the Greek Ptolemies, stood as a beacon of culture and power. Alexandria, its capital, was famed for its library and lighthouse, a hub of knowledge and trade. But the dynasty's last ruler, Cleopatra VII, was different. She embraced Egyptian language and religion, presenting herself as the goddess Isis. A shrewd leader, Cleopatra fought to keep Egypt independent as the Ptolemaic Golden Age faded. Rome's grip on Egypt tightened gradually, turning the Ptolemies into dependent clients. Cleopatra, recognizing Rome's dominance, forged alliances with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony, hoping to secure Egypt's future. Their partnership, both romantic and political, challenged Rome's new leader, Octavian, setting the stage for a final confrontation. Rome itself was in turmoil. The Republic, overwhelmed by its own expansion, was torn by social strife and civil war. Ambitious generals like Marius, Sulla and Pompey vied for power, eroding old Republican values and paving the way for warlords to dominate the political landscape. The assassination of Julius Caesar plunged Rome into chaos, leading to the rise of the second triumvirate, Octavian, Antony and Lepidus, who divided the Roman world among themselves. Antony took the east, and soon allied with Cleopatra, drawn by her resources and charisma. Their alliance, both strategic and passionate, aimed to secure their power, but would ultimately provoke Rome's wrath and set the stage for a final confrontation. The showdown came at Actium in 31 BC. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet was outmaneuvered by Octavian's admiral Agrippa. Cleopatra's sudden retreat led Antony to abandon the fight, sealing their defeat. Their dream of an Eastern empire collapsed, and Egypt's fate was sealed. Octavian, now Augustus, made Egypt his personal domain, Rome's breadbasket and treasury. He barred senators from entering without permission, ensuring no rival could seize its wealth or raise an army there. Egypt became the emperor's private estate, tightly controlled from the top. Augustus imposed a strict bureaucracy focused on taxation. Egypt was divided into nomes, each run by a Roman strategos. Local elites were co-opted for administration, bearing heavy burdens to meet tax quotas. This system maximized revenue for Rome, often at great cost to Egyptians. Alexandria, once a royal capital, became a provincial seat under Rome. Still a vital trade hub, it was denied self-governance, fueling resentment among its Greek elite. Only centuries later did the city gain a council, reflecting Rome's deep mistrust of its volatile population. Egypt's security relied on a permanent Roman garrison, initially 3 legions, later reduced but always formidable. The prefect of Egypt commanded these forces, preventing any senator from seizing military power. The legions, supported by auxiliaries, ensured the emperor's grip on the province. Roman soldiers in Egypt did more than fight. They enforced tax collection, maintained order, and built infrastructure. Their engineering skills supported agriculture and public works, but their presence also reminded Egyptians that their land now served Rome's interests above all. While internal security was a primary concern, the Roman army in Egypt was also tasked with defending the province's vast and challenging frontiers. To the west lay the vast expanse of the Libyan desert, home to nomadic tribes who could threaten the scattered oases and the western edge of the Nile Valley. To the east, the Arabian desert posed a similar threat, but the most significant and active frontier was to the south, in the region known as Nubia, or Kush. Here the Romans inherited a long-standing border conflict from the Ptolemies with the powerful kingdom of Myrrh, a sophisticated civilization centered further up the Nile. Shortly after the Roman conquest in 25 BC, the Meroitic queen, known as the Candace Amanirenas, launched a major raid into southern Egypt, attacking Roman garrisons at Syene and Philae and even carrying off a bronze head from a statue of Emperor Augustus. The Roman response was swift and brutal. The prefect Gaius Petronius led a punitive expedition deep into Nubia, sacking the city of Napata and forcing the Meroites to sue for peace. Following this campaign, a permanent and heavily fortified southern border was established at Hiera Sykaminos, marking the limit of direct Roman control and creating a buffer zone between the province and the Meroitic Kingdom. The Roman arrival layered a new, rigid hierarchy onto Ptolemaic Egypt's existing social pyramid. Roman citizens, a small group of officials, officers and veterans, sat at the apex. They held power and exemptions, residing mainly in Alexandria and fortresses. Their position demonstrated Roman authority. Below them were the Greeks, the Hellenized elite of cities like Alexandria. They retained privileges, dominating civic life and holding administrative positions. This intermediary class maintained status between Roman rulers and the Egyptian population. The economy of Roman Egypt was utterly dominated by agriculture. The annual flooding of the Nile River deposited fertile silt, creating an agricultural paradise. The Romans focused on maximizing production and perfecting the system of collection. They maintained the irrigation canals to ensure a bountiful harvest. The primary product was grain, specifically wheat and barley. Egypt's grain production was the principal reason for its immense value to the Roman Empire. This grain was transported down the Nile to Alexandria, where it was stored in massive granaries before being shipped to Rome. This grain fleet was the lifeline that fed the capital's massive population. Beyond its agricultural might, Roman Egypt was a vibrant centre of industry and a crucial hub for international trade. The city of Alexandria was not just the exit point for Egyptian grain, it was also a major manufacturing centre in its own right. Its workshops produced high-quality glass, fine linens, pottery, and luxury items like perfumes and jewellery. The papyrus industry, centred in the Delta, was a near monopoly, supplying the paper equivalent to the entire Roman world for its administrative records, literature, and personal correspondence. These industries, combined with the processing of agricultural goods, made the province an economic powerhouse that exported finished goods as well as raw materials. Egypt's unique geographical position, bridging the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, made it the gateway for Rome's lucrative trade with the East. Goods from Arabia, India, and even as far as China flowed into the Red Sea ports of Myos, Hormos and Berenice. From there, caravans, protected by the Roman military, trekked across the eastern desert to the Nile, where the goods were transferred to boats and floated downriver to Alexandria. Spices like pepper and cinnamon, silks, precious gems, and exotic animals were brought west, while Roman goods like wine, metalwork and glass were sent east. This trade brought immense wealth into the province, and, well, the customs duties collected on it were a significant source of revenue for the emperor's treasury. When Rome conquered Egypt, it did not impose its own gods. The Romans were generally tolerant in religious matters. They encountered a pantheon of gods that had been worshipped along the Nile for 3,000 years. Life continued to revolve around the worship of their ancient deities. Gods like Horus, Thoth, and Sobek remained central to the spiritual life of the villages and towns in the Nile Valley. The local temples continued to function much as they had under the pharaohs. These were not just places of worship, but also major economic and cultural centres. The priesthood continued to perform the ancient daily rituals. For the ordinary Egyptian, these temples were the tangible link to the divine. The old ways were resilient. The Romans introduced the imperial cult, a state-sponsored veneration of the emperor, fostering loyalty across the empire. In Egypt, this cult built upon the tradition of the divine ruler. Temples were dedicated to emperors, and priests oversaw their worship. This practice was a mandatory expression of political allegiance, demonstrating loyalty to Rome. The cult was prominent in Alexandria, fused with the worship of the goddess Roma. Festivals and sacrifices were held in the emperor's honor, reinforcing the empire's might. Participation in the imperial cult was a crucial part of public life, a statement that all were subjects of the divine emperor. Among the deities worshipped in Roman Egypt, Isis achieved widespread popularity across the entire Roman Empire. Isis was the great mother goddess. Under the Romans, her cult became a major international religion. She was seen as a universal savior, a compassionate mother who offered her followers protection and rebirth. Her cult was a mystery religion, meaning its central rituals were revealed only to initiates. Temples to Isis, known as Iseums, sprang up in port cities and urban centres. Her iconography, the goddess nursing her infant son, became one of the most recognizable religious images of the age. The Roman conquest of Egypt did not bring an end to the grand tradition of temple building that had defined the landscape of the Nile Valley for millennia. Instead, the early Roman emperors, particularly those of the Julio-Claudian and Flavian dynasties, embraced this tradition as a powerful tool of statecraft. They continued the practice of the Ptolemaic kings before them, funding the construction and completion of magnificent temples dedicated to the ancient Egyptian gods. This architectural patronage served a crucial political purpose. By acting as pious pharaohs, Roman emperors legitimized their rule in the eyes of the Egyptian people and the influential native priesthood, seamlessly inserting themselves into a 3,000-year-old lineage of divine kingship and cosmic stewardship. These temples were built in a purely traditional Egyptian style, almost indistinguishable from those of the New Kingdom or Ptolemaic eras. They featured massive pylons, open-air courtyards, hyper-style halls with towering columns, and dimly lit inner sanctuaries. The walls were covered in intricate hieroglyphic inscriptions and detailed reliefs carved according to the ancient artistic canons. However, a closer look reveals the new reality of Roman power. Amidst the images of Horus, Isis and Amun-Ra, the figure of the Roman emperor appears, depicted in the full regalia of a pharaoh, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt and making offerings to the gods, a visible statement of continuity and control. The Roman period witnessed the final flourishing of monumental Egyptian temple construction, a last great burst of architectural energy before the old religion began its slow decline. These structures stand today as some of the best preserved temples in all of Egypt, precisely because they were the last to be built. The Temple of Horus at Edfu, though primarily a Ptolemaic construction, was finally completed under Roman rule. Its massive scale, perfect preservation, and the completeness of its inscriptions provide an unparalleled window into the religious and architectural world that the Romans inherited and, for a time, chose to sustain. It represents the culmination of centuries of pharaonic architectural evolution sponsored by Greek and Roman masters. Further south, near the traditional border of Egypt and Nubia, lies the island of Philae, a sacred site dedicated to the goddess Isis. The Romans added significantly to the existing temple complex, which became one of the most important pilgrimage centers in the entire empire. The Kiosk of Trajan, an elegant and unfinished pavilion with towering floral columns, remains one of the most iconic images of Roman Egypt. It was a gateway to the sanctuary of Isis, a place where the Roman emperor honored the most beloved of the Egyptian goddesses, whose cult was by then captivating followers across the Mediterranean world, from the shores of Egypt to the city of Rome itself. The first centuries of Roman rule in Egypt were characterized by stability and systematic exploitation. Following the chaos of the late Ptolemaic era, the Pax Romana brought an end to conflict. The province settled into a rhythm, governed by the emperor's prefect and legions. This peace allowed agriculture and trade to flourish. Augustus's administrative machinery ensured grain ships sailed on time and tax revenues flowed into the treasury, solidifying Egypt's role as the empire's economic bedrock. Cultural toleration allowed ancient religious traditions to continue. Temples were maintained with imperial funds, and emperors were depicted as pharaohs. The Roman tax system siphoned off the province's wealth, burdening the peasant farmers. The relative calm of the first 2 centuries came to an abrupt end in the 3rd century, a period known as the Crisis of the 3rd Century that shook the entire Roman Empire to its foundations. Decades of civil war, rapid turnover of emperors, rampant inflation, and barbarian invasions on the frontiers created widespread instability. Egypt was not immune to this chaos. The province suffered from military usurpations, economic disruption, and new external threats. The firm grip that the central government in Rome had held over the province began to weaken, and the carefully calibrated system of administration and exploitation started to break down under the immense pressure of the empire-wide crisis. One of the most significant threats came from the south and east. The Blemis, a nomadic people from the eastern desert, began to launch increasingly bold raids into the Nile Valley, threatening towns and disrupting trade routes. In the 260s, the short-lived Palmyrene Empire, based in Syria and led by the warrior Queen Zenobia, briefly seized control of Egypt, severing it from Roman authority. The Roman Emperor Aurelian eventually reconquered the province, but these events shattered the illusion of impenetrable security that had defined the early Roman period. The military had to be reconfigured to deal with these new, more mobile threats, and the sense of permanent stability was lost for good. The reforms of the emperors Diocletian and Constantine at the turn of the 4th century marked the beginning of a new era, often termed later Roman or Byzantine Egypt. The province underwent a radical administrative overhaul. Egypt was divided into several smaller provinces, breaking its monolithic unity and bringing it more in line with the rest of the empire. The old distinction between the emperor's personal province and senatorial provinces was abolished. A new, more complex bureaucracy was put in place, and the military and civil commands were separated. This was a fundamental reshaping of the government, moving away from the Augustan model towards the structure of the later Byzantine state. The most profound transformation of this period was the rise of Christianity. After centuries of persecution, Emperor Constantine's conversion in the early 4th century made Christianity the favoured religion of the empire. In Egypt, this shift was embraced with fervent enthusiasm. The church grew rapidly in wealth and power, developing a strong hierarchical structure under the authority of the powerful bishop or pope of Alexandria. Monasticism, a new form of intense religious devotion, was born in the Egyptian deserts, with charismatic figures like St. Anthony attracting thousands of followers who sought to renounce the world for a life of prayer and asceticism. Egypt became a heartland of Christian thought and spirituality. Roman rule in Egypt wasn't a simple replacement, but a lasting transformation. The legions of Augustus absorbed a civilization, recognizing the immense value of its new prize. Rome imposed a rigid system of governance to extract wealth. Grain, gold and porphyry flowed from the Nile Valley, reshaping the Egyptian economy. This new order was built upon military power. The Roman garrison enforced the peace, protected tax collectors and engineered infrastructure. This brought stability, but it was dictated by a foreign master serving Rome's interests above all else. The story of Roman Egypt is not merely one of what Rome did to Egypt, but also of what Egypt gave to Rome. The influence flowed both ways, and the treasures that the empire received were not just material. The most immediate and tangible gift was, of course, the grain. The annual shipment from Alexandria was the lifeblood of the capital, the foundation of the emperor's ability to maintain social order and political power. But Egypt also gave the Roman world papyrus, the essential medium for communication, administration, and literature. It provided the empire with exquisite glass, fine linens, and the hard, beautiful stones that became the ultimate symbols of imperial luxury and permanence, shaping the very look and feel of the city of Rome. Beyond these material goods, Egypt exported its gods. The cults of Isis and Serapis, nurtured in the multicultural crucible of Hellenistic and Roman Egypt, became international phenomena. They offered a brand of personal, emotional and salvific religion that proved immensely appealing across the vast and diverse empire. In a world often characterized by impersonal state cults, the mysteries of Isis provided a sense of community, divine compassion, and the promise of an afterlife. The spread of these Egyptian cults throughout the Mediterranean prepared the Roman mind for new religious ideas from the East, creating a spiritual landscape in which another faith, Christianity, would eventually find purchase and flourish. The 7 centuries of Roman dominion mark a pivotal bridge in Egypt's narrative. This era signals the definitive end of the pharaonic world, a civilization that had endured for 3 millennia. The Roman conquest integrated the Nile Valley into the Mediterranean world. Yet even as ancient traditions faded, new forms of expression emerged, none more evocative than the haunting Fayum portraits. Painted nearly 2,000 years ago, the Fayum portraits are among the most vivid and personal relics of Roman Egypt. Created between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, these lifelike images adorned the faces of mummified bodies, bridging the worlds of the living and the dead. They are found mostly in the Fayum region, west of the Nile, but their influence spread across the land. The artists who crafted these portraits used the encaustic technique, mixing coloured pigments with hot beeswax and applying them to wooden panels. This method allowed for remarkable depth, luminosity and durability. The result? Eyes that seem to gaze across centuries, skin tones that glow with life, and expressions that capture individuality and emotion. The wooden panels, often made from native sycamore or imported cedar, were carefully prepared. Artists layered rich colours, reds, ochres and deep blacks, using fine brushes and heated tools. Gold leaf sometimes adorned jewellery or clothing, highlighting the status of the deceased. Each portrait was unique, a testament to the sitter's identity, wealth and aspirations. The people depicted in the Fayum portraits were a blend of cultures, Egyptian, Greek, Roman and others, reflecting the cosmopolitan world of Roman Egypt. Their hairstyles, clothing and jewellery reveal shifting fashions and social status. Some wear traditional Egyptian amulets, while others display Roman togas or Greek-style tunics. The portraits capture a society in transition where ancient beliefs mingled with new customs. These images were not mere decorations. They served a profound funerary purpose, attached to the mummified bodies and placed in tombs. The portraits were meant to preserve the memory and presence of the deceased, ensuring recognition in the afterlife. They are a poignant fusion of Egyptian spiritual tradition and Greco-Roman realism. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of these portraits, often remarkably well preserved by the dry desert sands. Each discovery is a moment of connection, a face from antiquity meeting the gaze of the modern world. Today, the Fayum portraits are displayed in museums across the globe, celebrated for their artistry and humanity. Art historians regard the Fayum portraits as the earliest true-to-life painted portraits in history. Their influence echoes through the centuries, inspiring later traditions of portraiture in both East and West. They remind us that beneath the trappings of empire and the passage of time, the desire to be remembered, to be seen, remains universal. The language of administration shifted, and hieroglyphics slowly faded. The Roman period represents a profound break with the past, a closing of the door on ancient Egypt. The ruins of Roman fortresses stand in the desert. Temples completed under Roman patronage are preserved in detail. But in the Fayum portraits, the faces of a lost world endure, silent, watchful, and alive. The Fayum mummy portraits reveal the faces of the multicultural elite, a symbol of cultural fusion. In their gaze, we glimpse the enduring echoes of a world transformed, where Egypt's ancient soul met the new realities of Rome, and where art became a bridge across time. Welcome. Today we embark on a tranquil journey back in time, to a place of profound significance, a landscape carved by both nature and human ambition. We are travelling to the west bank of the River Nile, opposite the ancient city of Thebes, modern Luxor. Here, nestled in the sun-scorched hills of the Theban necropolis, lies a valley with secrets. This is the Valley of the Kings, a royal burial ground of the New Kingdom for nearly 500 years, a testament to a quest for eternal life and enduring power. Known in ancient times as the Great and Majestic Necropolis, it was carefully chosen. Its towering peak, Al-Qurn, resembles a natural pyramid. For centuries, from the 18th to the 20th dynasty, this secluded wadi became the final resting place for the kings. Queens and powerful nobles were laid to rest here as well. Their tombs were not grand pyramids visible for miles, but hidden subterranean palaces, designed to protect mummified remains and immense treasures from the ever-present threat of tomb robbers. During our time together, we will explore this site in detail. We will move at a gentle pace, letting the ancient stones tell their stories. We will delve into the geology and the hydrology of the valley, seeing how landscape shaped the tombs. We will trace its long history, from first use as a royal necropolis to eventual decline. We will examine tomb development, architecture, decoration, and the precious equipment they held. We will look at the belief and ritual behind it all, investigate tomb robbers through history, and the archaeologists who work to uncover and preserve this heritage. The valley continues to yield secrets, 65 tombs and chambers found so far, and the tantalizing possibility of more. Our journey will also consider its modern legacy, its role as a premier tourist destination, and the crucial balance between access and conservation. So, let us begin our exploration of this incredible open-air museum, a window into the soul of ancient Egypt. The story of the Valley of the Kings is a layered narrative written in stone, in art, and in the very dust of the desert. To appreciate its meaning, we begin beneath our feet. This valley is a deliberate choice of landscape. Layers of sedimentary rock, dense, workable limestone interspersed with softer marl and shale offered both opportunity and constraint to ancient builders. Generations of craftsmen read these layers with practiced eyes, tunneling through the hillside with bronze and flint, turning raw geology into corridors, chambers, and sanctuaries. Natural weaknesses threaded the rock, faults and joints that dictated the placement, the size, and even the shape of each tomb. Plans met reality at the rock face, and reality often won. A sudden fracture could divert a passage or force a dogleg turn, altering the intended design. Every tomb preserves traces of this dialogue between human intention and unforgiving stone. Cracks and fissures were never trivial. A single joint could compromise a ceiling or sheer decoration from a wall, threatening both structure and sacred images. Ancient engineers learned to listen to the mountain. They tapped for hollows, watched for hairline seams, and when necessary, abandoned sections to begin anew, an expensive wager against time. Geology here is inseparable from water. Though the valley is dry most years, it is, in truth, a wadi, a channel awaiting rare, violent storms. When rain finally comes, the baked ground refuses it. Water cascades from the cliffs, gathers speed in the gullies, and surges along the wadi floor with startling force. Floods scour the landscape and, most dangerously, pour through open entrances, filling chambers, dissolving plasters, and lifting pigments that have clung to stone for millennia. Within, priceless objects can be tumbled into sodden confusion. The flood that sealed Tutankhamun's doorway, hiding it for ages, remains the valley's most famous cautionary tale. Ancient builders answered with strategy, entrances cut high on slopes, diversion walls and channels to deflect the torrent, and steep corridors that acted as sumps. Simple, clever hydraulics. Today, the struggle endures. Modern channels and catchments stand guard, while conservators labour to stabilise fragile walls and safeguard colour that time and water conspire to erase. Selecting a tomb site was the first and gravest decision, for the king's eternal security rested on the quality and behaviour of the stone. Above, the upper shale swells and crumbles with moisture. Below, the limestone holds a steadier hand. Builders pierced the fragile layers swiftly, then drove steep, plunging corridors to bypass unstable strata and reach sound rock. Over it all rises Al-Qurn, its pyramid silhouette a natural monument. To New Kingdom eyes, that peak linked their hidden burials with the Old Kingdom's ideal, enduring form married to divine order. Its solid limestone was read as an omen of favour. Its pyramidal form evoked the primeval mound, the land emerging from the waters of creation. The choice of place was practical, yes, but also profoundly sacred. In the hands of architects and artisans, geology became a medium. Beds selected, faults avoided, passages aligned to strength. Bronze and flint, guided by listening and skill, shaped a palace for the dead from the living rock. And so the ground itself underpinned ambition, stone that set limits, invited ingenuity, and ultimately bore the weight of eternity. In this valley, the earth and the afterlife were hewn as one. Having explored the very bones of the land, we now turn to the soul of the place, its history. The ancient Egyptians did not call this site the Valley of the Kings. To them it was known by a far more evocative and descriptive name, Ta Sekhet Maat, the Great Field. However, its full formal title was even grander, Ta Intamehu, the great and majestic necropolis of the millions of years of the pharaoh. Life, strength, health, in the west of Thebes. This name reveals everything about its purpose. It was not merely a cemetery, it was a monumental machine for eternity, a sacred landscape engineered to guarantee the pharaoh's rebirth for millions of years to come. Over the course of its 500-year history, the use of the valley evolved. The tombs themselves reflect the changing fortunes and priorities of different dynasties. Earliest tombs from the 18th dynasty, like Thutmose, feature a bent axis plan. The entrance corridor descends steeply, then makes a sharp right-angled turn before the burial chamber. This dogleg may have been to confuse robbers, or to avoid faults in the rock. Decoration in early tombs was often simple, painted figures on plain backgrounds resembling papyrus scrolls. From the moment the first pharaoh was laid to rest, the immense wealth interred with him became a powerful lure for the desperate and the greedy. Despite the secrecy, the remote location, and the presence of the Medjay guards, tomb robbing was an almost constant problem throughout the history of the Valley of the Kings. These were not simple smash-and-grab operations. The robbers were often highly organized, sometimes even including the very workmen who had built the tombs, and the officials charged with protecting them. They possessed insider knowledge of the tomb layouts, the locations of hidden chambers, and the methods used to seal the entrances, giving them a significant advantage over the authorities. At dusk, the valley grows quiet. In this twilight, we mark a turning point. By the end of the 20th dynasty, around 1077 BCE, the age of royal building here was drawing to a close. Ramesses XI's burial would be the last of its kind in this sacred wadi. The final royal chapter written into the rock. Beyond the cliffs, Egypt's power fractured. Rulers in the north at Tanis, and the high priests of Amun holding the south from Thebes. The kingdom's centre no longer held as before. With fragmentation came scarcity. The resources and central authority to cut and defend new royal tombs in the valley simply vanished. In the 21st dynasty, pharaohs chose burial within temple precincts of the northern capital, Tanis, a different approach to royal rest far from these western cliffs. As new burials ceased, the valley's purpose shifted from creation to salvage and reuse, a sober phase of recovery and protection. For nearly 500 years, this secluded wadi served as a sacred stage, the final act in the lives of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. It was a landscape of divine purpose, meticulously engineered to guide the royal spirit through peril and toward rebirth. From the geology that set its limits to the theology that clothed its walls, every choice expressed a single ambition: to conquer death and secure a legacy for millions of years. The Valley of the Kings is more than a collection of tombs. It is a priceless archive of human civilization. The art upon its walls opens a window onto belief and tradition, scenes that still speak across 3 millennia. The treasures of Tutankhamun and others have shaped our understanding of daily life, royal power, and funerary practices. Today, it is a premier heritage site, welcoming visitors from around the world, a popularity that brings a modern paradox of access and preservation. Conservators and archaeologists labour on stabilising fragile walls, safeguarding colour, excavating, studying and conserving. Steady, patient work in service of time. New technologies reveal what eyes once missed: scanning light across pigments, digital reconstructions, rekindling hidden details and lost colours. The valley remains a place of discovery, a testament to human faith and the enduring quest for immortality. As we leave its silent, sun-baked corridors, we carry a deeper regard for all we have seen. Hopes, fears, and the very soul of a civilization were carved into living rock, a legacy in stone that continues to speak to us across the ages. Deep in the Theban hills, nestled on the west bank of the Nile, lies a site unlike any other in Egypt. This is Deir el-Medina. It is a place that holds the secrets of ordinary people who lived extraordinary lives. For nearly 400 years, this village housed the master craftsmen of the New Kingdom. These were the artisans, the stonemasons, the painters who constructed and decorated the magnificent royal tombs. They worked in the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. Their hands shaped the eternal resting places of pharaohs like Tutankhamun and Ramesses the Great. They called their village Set Mat, meaning the place of truth. This ancient community existed from roughly 1550 to 1070 BC, through the 18th dynasty, 19th dynasty, and 20th dynasty. It was a purpose-built settlement, established by the pharaohs to house the elite workforce responsible for their afterlife preparations. The location was deliberately isolated, hidden away in a natural amphitheatre of rock. This seclusion was intended to protect the secrets of the royal necropolis. The men who lived here possessed skills of immense value. Their knowledge of tomb construction and decoration was a state secret. The village itself was therefore carefully guarded and managed directly by the vizier, the pharaoh's highest official, ensuring its inhabitants remained separate from the wider population of Thebes. The story of Deir el-Medina does not end with the decline of the New Kingdom and the abandonment of the royal necropolis. Centuries later, during the Christian era, the village found a new purpose. Its small temple, originally dedicated to the goddess Hathor and the deified pharaoh Amenhotep I, was transformed. It became a Coptic Christian church and later a monastery. This monastery was dedicated to Saint Isidorus the Martyr. It is from this later chapter of its history that the site derives its modern Arabic name, Deir el-Medina, which translates to Monastery of the City. In this documentary, we will journey back in time. We will explore the dusty streets and silent houses of this remarkable village. We will uncover the daily lives, the beliefs and the struggles of the people who lived here. We will not be focusing on the grand pharaohs or the monumental temples that dominate our popular image of ancient Egypt. Instead, we will delve into the lives of the individuals who made it all possible. Join me as we peel back the layers of sand and time to reveal the intimate and detailed world of Deir el-Medina, a community that has left us an unparalleled legacy of its existence. What makes Deir el-Medina so exceptionally important is the sheer volume of information its inhabitants left behind. Unlike any other settlement from the ancient world, this village provides us with a continuous documented account of community life. This record spans almost 400 years. It is a treasure trove of written material preserved by the dry desert climate. The artisans of Deir el-Medina were highly literate. They recorded everything. They wrote on countless fragments of pottery and flakes of limestone known as ostraca and on papyrus. These texts were the notepads and official records of their time, capturing the minutiae of their existence in stunning detail. We have records of their work rosters, wages, and rations from the state. We can read their private letters about family quarrels, friendships, and anxieties. Legal documents reveal how they resolved disputes, arguments over property, accusations of theft. We can study religious beliefs through hymns and prayers, and even read about medical concerns and remedies they used. This immense archive allows us to reconstruct the social fabric of the community with clarity. The archaeological remains of the village perfectly complement this textual evidence. Excavations unearthed the entire settlement, over 70 houses, a central street, and a protective wall. We can walk through the floor plans of their homes, see the ovens used to bake their bread, and identify small household chapels. The village had its own cemetery with decorated tombs that mimic royal tombs on a smaller scale. This combination of ruins and text provides a uniquely holistic view of life. French archaeologist Bernard Bruyère began excavating the site in 1922. For decades, he and his team uncovered the village, its tombs, and the great rubbish pits where thousands of ostraca were discarded. His work produced one of the most thoroughly documented accounts of daily life from antiquity. Deir el-Medina is not just another ruin, it is a living museum, a place where we can hear the voices of ancient Egyptians, understand their society, and appreciate the intricate details of a community that thrived over 3,000 years ago. Walking through the ruins of Deir el-Medina today, one can still sense the organized nature of the community. The village was not an organic settlement that grew over time. It was a planned town laid out on a clear grid. A long, straight street, just a few meters wide, runs down the center. On either side of this thoroughfare, houses were built in neat rows, sharing party walls like modern terrace houses. The entire settlement was enclosed by a thick mud brick wall. A single gate, guarded day and night, controlled all entry and exit. This design speaks of purpose and control, a self-contained world created specifically for the pharaoh's elite workers. The houses themselves were remarkably uniform. A typical home consisted of 4 main rooms. The first room served as a public reception area. Beyond this lay private living quarters. At the very back was the kitchen, and a staircase leading to the roof. Life was lived both indoors and outdoors. The flat rooftops were essential living spaces used for sleeping during the hot summer months, for catching the evening breeze, and for storage. The narrow street was an extension of the home, where neighbours socialized and children played. Daily life in Deir el-Medina was governed by a strict and predictable rhythm. The workforce was divided into 2 teams, or gangs, the left side and the right side, mirroring the 2 sides of a royal tomb. Each gang was led by a foreman. The men worked an 8-day week, followed by 2 days of rest. Their workday began at dawn. They walked from the village over the high pass to the Valley of the Kings. About an hour. They spent the day in the dark, stuffy tombs, carving and painting by flickering oil lamps. The work was highly specialized. Draftsmen, sculptors, painters. The men lived in temporary huts near the Valley of the Kings, returning to the village only for their 2-day weekend. Rest was for family, tending personal affairs and participating in village religious festivals. While the men were the official state employees, the women of Deir el-Medina were the pillars of the community's domestic and economic life. With their husbands away, women were responsible for managing the household entirely on their own. Women enjoyed relatively high legal and social status. Records show they could own property, they could inherit, they could dispose of property in their own right, and they could bring lawsuits before the local court. Textile production was central. Women spun thread and wove linen cloth. Linen was a valuable commodity. Women could trade surplus cloth for necessities like extra food, pottery or services. Women also played a key role in religious life. They managed household shrines, made offerings to family ancestors, and kept protective gods like Bez and Tawere, associated with childbirth and home protection. In a small, enclosed community like Deir el-Medina, disputes were inevitable. Most minor disagreements and civil cases were handled by a local council known as the Kenbet, composed of the leading men of the village. The legal ostraca give us a fascinating insight into the kinds of problems the villagers faced. The cases deal with everything from disputes over the ownership of a donkey to unpaid debts, theft of tools, and property inheritance arguments. The work of a tomb builder was physically demanding and often dangerous. The texts mention physicians and scorpion charmers. These treatments often combined practical medicine with magical spells. Life in the place of truth was not always peaceful. The most famous example of this is the series of labor strikes that occurred during the reign of Rameses III. Their rations of grain were weeks overdue. Faced with starvation, the artisans took unprecedented action. The men laid down their tools and marched out of the village, towards the great mortuary temples. They staged a sit-in, shouting, "We are hungry." This was a bold and risky act of defiance. Their actions represent the first recorded strikes in human history. The decline of the New Kingdom brought other problems, most notably a wave of tomb robbing. Shockingly, the records show that some of the very men from Deir el-Medina, those entrusted to guard the secrets of the necropolis, were involved in these crimes. This breakdown of order marks the beginning of the end for the village, a final, scandalous chapter in the life of this extraordinary community. Deir el-Medina stands as a singular testament to the power of preservation. It is a time capsule that has gifted us an intimate and deeply human portrait of a community that thrived over 3 millennia ago. This combination allows us to move beyond the grand, impersonal narrative of pharaohs and pyramids. We see them not as a faceless workforce, but as individuals with names, families, and distinct personalities. We read their private letters, witness their legal disputes, and even learn of their health problems. This level of detail is unparalleled, offering a microcosm of New Kingdom society. We discover the vital roles played by women. We see state employees who were conscious of their rights, and a community that could govern and care for itself through its own local institutions. Ultimately, the story of Deir el-Medina is a profound reminder that history is made not just by kings and conquerors, but by everyday people. In the dusty remains of their homes and the delicate script on a pottery shard, we find a connection that transcends time. Deir el-Medina provides an invaluable window into the past, forever changing our view of the ancient world by showing us in vivid detail how ordinary people lived extraordinary lives. There are certain figures in the history of science whose work provides the very foundation. Carl Richard Lepsius was such a man. Born in the year 1810 and living until 1884, a quiet but formidable pioneer of modern Egyptology. He was not a seeker of treasure, but a collector of a far more valuable commodity: information. Not a single dazzling discovery, but a slow, methodical, monumental effort to record, to catalogue, and to understand the civilization of the ancient Nile Valley. Carl Richard Lepsius was born on the 23rd of December 1810 in Naumburg an der Saale, a town in what is now Germany. His upbringing was one steeped in intellectual curiosity, his father being a classical scholar who undoubtedly nurtured his son's academic inclinations from a young age. This early environment set the course for his life's work. He pursued a rigorous education, delving into classical philology, archaeology, linguistics. He studied at Leipzig, Göttingen, Berlin. He mastered Latin, Greek. His interests expanded to Sanskrit and early Semitic languages. He went to Paris. He studied under Jean-Antoine Letronne. He gained access to Champollion's papers and teachings. That exposure sparked his interest in Egyptology. He immersed himself in ancient Egyptian language study, learned hieroglyphs, learned later cursive forms, and learned Coptic. The opportunity for Lepsius to realize his grand ambition came in 1842, on the recommendation of the influential scholar Alexander von Humboldt and Christian Bunsen. King Friedrich Wilhelm IV of Prussia agreed to sponsor a major scientific expedition to Egypt and Nubia. Lepsius, at the age of just 31, was appointed to lead it. This was not a simple tour, but a comprehensive state-funded project with clear scientific objectives. The primary goal was to systematically survey, record, and collect artifacts and information from monuments along the Nile Valley, to effectively create a paper museum of ancient Egypt for scholars across Europe. The team Lepsius assembled showed the breadth of his vision. Scholars, professional artists, draftsmen, architects, and a mould maker. Key members included Ernst Weidenbach and Johann Jakob Frey. They carried the best scientific instruments of the day, surveying tools, cameras, lucida, and vast quantities of paper and ink for making squeezes. Work began in late 1842 and lasted nearly 3 years, until 1845. A slow, methodical progression southwards along the Nile, from the Memphite necropolis through Middle Egypt to the grand temples of Thebes. The team pushed beyond Egypt into Nubia, reaching the Khartoum area and the pyramids and temples of Meroe. Among the most enduring and practical of Lepsius's contributions is what has become known as the Lepsius List of Pyramids. As the Prussian expedition travelled through Lower Egypt's necropolises, they moved from Abu Rawash to Meidum. Lepsius undertook the first systematic survey of these monumental structures. He devised a simple yet effective system, assigning Roman numerals to each pyramid. He started with Pyramid 1 at Abu Rawash and then proceeded southward. The numbering brought order to the pyramid fields. It included the famous pyramids of Giza and Dashur and many smaller ruinous structures previously overlooked. His original list catalogued 67 pyramids covering royal burial sites of the Old Kingdom and the Middle Kingdom. Some smaller mud brick pyramids he recorded have deteriorated, been lost, or vanished beneath shifting sands. In some cases, his brief notes and sketches are the only remaining evidence, an irreplaceable snapshot of the 1840s landscape. Beyond his archaeological work, Lepsius made a profound and lasting contribution to linguistics, a quiet architecture of letters that would shape how scholars heard and rendered the world's voices. He recognized a fundamental problem. There was no consistent scientific method for transcribing the sounds of unwritten or ancient languages, especially those across Africa and Asia. Scholars improvised, accuracy suffered, meaning shifted. European alphabets were ill-equipped to capture many unfamiliar sounds. Guttural, emphatic, tonal. The symbols were few, the phonemes many, the fit imperfect. To solve this, Lepsius produced his standard alphabet for reducing unwritten languages and foreign graphic systems to a uniform orthography in European letters. On its pages, he set out a disciplined scheme, first published in German in 1855, then in English in 1863. Its core principle was simple and exacting: one symbol for every distinct sound. He kept the Latin alphabet as a base and expanded it with diacritical marks, dots, lines, hooks, placed above, below, and through letters to fix fine shades of speech. The alphabet was no armchair theory. It grew from practical necessity in the Prussian expedition. In the field, measuring, mapping, copying inscriptions, making squeezes, reliable notation was as vital as a compass. It was meant to be universal, equally capable of transcribing ancient Egyptian, Coptic, Meroitic, Old Nubian and contemporary African languages, a single orthographic key for many doors. Lepsius consulted missionaries and linguists worldwide to refine the system, aiming for a single, unified tool that served science, education, and religious translation with equal fidelity. Precision first, doctrine nowhere. In classrooms, in scripture translations, and in scholarly notes, his alphabet offered clarity where guesswork once stood. It gave voices a stable script and made comparison, teaching, and faithful reading possible across continents. The most tangible and magnificent result of the Prussian expedition was the monumental publication that followed it. Denkmäler aus Ägypten und Äthiopien, Lepsius's magnum opus. Published in 12 immense volumes between 1849 and 1859, it was of unprecedented scale and detail. A work conceived not as a souvenir, but as a scientific edifice. It contained nearly 900 large-format lithographic plates, each a precise window onto Egypt and Nubia. The plates reproduce thousands of drawings, maps, and measured plans made by the expedition's artists and architects. Draftsmanship turned into durable record. Grand panoramas, detailed architectural elevations and tomb layouts, and vast corpora of inscriptions were set out with unwavering clarity. Organized geographically, north to south, the Denkmäler follows the Nile's course. Accompanying text volumes add commentary and context. For many remote Nubian sites and lesser visited temples, these were the first accurate, complete recordings, and they remain valuable today. Such fidelity demanded years of careful editing and costly production, massive fold-outs and the latest lithographic techniques to capture every line. The publication cemented Lepsius's reputation and stood as a testament to Prussian scientific achievement, a foundational corpus for the 19th century and beyond. Lepsius's influence extended far beyond his fieldwork. He was a pivotal figure in shaping European museum collections. In 1855, he became co-director of the Egyptian Museum of Berlin. In 1865, he was appointed keeper of the Egyptian collection. He was an active architect of the collection, aiming beyond a cabinet of curiosities to a systematic library of objects. The expedition acquired objects under his oversight: gateways, tomb chapel walls, statues, stelae, papyri, guided by scholarly value. We must view these activities within their 19th century context. Removing artifacts, common then, is now under intense ethical scrutiny and debate. His detailed records often provide the only provenance for removed objects. He advised museums and collectors, encouraging chronological and thematic displays to tell a coherent story of Egypt's past. His influence shaped what was collected and how it was presented and understood by the public for generations. This transformed Berlin into a world-leading centre for Egyptological research, a status it still holds today. At the heart of all of Lepsius's achievements was a philosophy of fieldwork: precision, systematization, comprehensiveness. When he arrived in Egypt, the prevailing approach was often hurried exploration, focused on finding spectacular objects or clearing tombs as quickly as possible. Lepsius introduced a different pace. He understood that the context of an object was just as important as the object itself. The goal was not simply to find things, but to understand and record their relationships to each other and to the landscape. Every site was approached with a clear plan. First, detailed maps, then structures measured and drawn in plan, elevation, and cross-section. Only after the survey did they copy inscriptions, pioneering large-scale use of paper squeezes for fine, three-dimensional impressions. Lightweight to transport, squeezes captured detail beyond drawing. In Berlin, they yielded exact plaster casts for study. The legacy of Carl Richard Lepsius is not contained within a single discovery, but woven into the methods and foundational texts of Egyptology. After the expedition, he remained a dominant force through extensive academic work and teaching, his influence living on in pages, plans, and practice. As a professor at the University of Berlin, he trained a new generation of Egyptologists, instilling rigorous philological accuracy and methodical research practices. His student, Georg Ebers, became a leading scholar. His student, Adolf Ehrmann, became a leading scholar. Before photography, precise lithographs were the closest thing to being on site. Even after, the drawings clarified faint or damaged reliefs. He worked to reconcile king lists with monument evidence. His Königsbuch der alten Ägypter in 1858 sought a reliable pharaonic chronology. Many conclusions were refined. He was a man of his era, and some interpretations have been superseded. Yet his systematic weighing of sources shaped future chronology. From field notes to printed plates, his method bridged observation and record. Still, the robustness of his data keeps his work useful. Modern scholars return to his drawings, maps, and list of pyramids to re-examine evidence. His greatest legacy, not just answers, but the raw material for new questions and new answers. Carl Richard Lepsius passed away in 1884, leaving behind a field he had irrevocably professionalized. Egyptology reshaped from romantic adventure into a structured academic discipline. His career was a testament to systematic work, patient observation, and unflinching accuracy. Measured drawings, careful notes, context before spectacle, precision that turned exploration into scholarship. He was not a seeker of gold, but a cartographer of history, mapping not only the geography of the Nile Valley, but the landscape of its ancient civilization. When an archaeologist uncovers a new tomb in Saqqara, They will likely consult the Lepsius list to see if he noted any structure there. When a linguist studies a difficult passage, they may turn to the plates for a clearer copy of the inscription. His work serves as a fixed point in time, a snapshot before modern tourism, pollution and urban expansion. And every student who maps a site or copies an inscription follows in his footsteps. He established a blueprint for scientific fieldwork that new technologies refine but do not replace. Lepsius gave the world a map of stone and script, proving that thousands of careful facts can reveal a civilization's grand story. Imagine, if you will, a vast sun-drenched plain. The mighty Nile River flows nearby, its waters a ribbon of life through the arid land. Here on the west bank, opposite the modern city of Luxor, stand two giants, their immense figures carved from single blocks of stone. They sit silently on thrones, facing the rising sun. For more than 3,000 years they've watched empires rise and fall. They've seen countless dawns break over the Theban hills. These are the colossi of Memnon, twin statues of a great pharaoh, frozen in time yet somehow alive-looking. They're the last remnants of a world long vanished. These figures are truly colossal. Each rises to about 60 feet, roughly the height of a modern 5-story building, carved from quartzite sandstone, an incredibly hard stone. Their weight is staggering, over 700 tons each. Imagine stacking more than 100 adult African elephants. For centuries they've sat, weathered by wind and sand, features worn, bodies cracked, but presence utterly commanding. Not merely statues, guardians of a forgotten gateway. These two statues did not always sit in such lonely isolation. Behind them stretched one of the largest and most opulent mortuary temples ever built in Egypt. It was the temple of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. The temple complex covered a vast area sprawling over nearly 87 acres. Today almost nothing of it remains above ground. The annual floods of the Nile have washed it all away. Imagine this temple in its heyday. A long avenue lined with sphinxes would have led visitors towards the main entrance. Great courtyards filled with statues, columns opened up one after another, walls covered in vibrant reliefs depicting the pharaoh's great deeds. Priests would have performed daily rituals, their chants echoing through the sacred spaces. Only the two colossal quartzite statues were too massive, too heavy to be moved, and so they remain, solitary witnesses to the grandeur that once lay behind them. For centuries, the northern Colossus held a strange and captivating secret. Following a powerful earthquake in 27 BC, which shattered its upper half, the statue began to sing at dawn. As the first rays of sunlight warmed the cool morning stone, a strange musical sound would emerge from the fractured giant. It was described by early travellers as a sad, whistling moan, or sometimes like the snapping of a harp string. This phenomenon turned the silent stone giant into an ancient oracle. People travelled from all corners of the Roman Empire, from Greece to Rome, to hear the mysterious sound for themselves. The Greeks and the Romans re-identified the statues. They did not see the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III. Instead, they saw Memnon, the mythical hero king of Ethiopia. In Greek mythology, Memnon was the son of Eos, the goddess of the dawn. He had fought bravely in the Trojan War, only to be slain by the great warrior Achilles. The Romans believed that the mournful sound was Memnon crying out to his mother, the dawn goddess, each morning as she greeted him with her light. Distinguished visitors, including several Roman emperors, made the pilgrimage. The Emperor Hadrian and his wife Sabina visited in 130 AD and heard the sound on multiple occasions. These visitors often left inscriptions on the statue's legs and base. Like a visitor's book carved in stone, tell us who came, when they came, and whether they were fortunate enough to hear the lament of Memnon. Around the year 199 AD, the Roman Emperor Septimius Severus had the fractured upper half of the statue repaired using several blocks of sandstone. His intention was to honor the oracle, but by repairing the statue, he inadvertently silenced it. Memnon fell silent and has remained so ever since. The creation of these stone giants began at a place called Gebel El Ahmar, near modern-day Cairo, over 400 miles to the north. They freed 2 monolithic blocks. The massive block was likely dragged on a wooden sledge from the quarry to the banks of the Nile River. At the river, the block was loaded onto an enormous barge. The journey up the Nile was a slow and majestic procession. Arriving at Thebes was only half the battle. They painstakingly hauled the blocks into their final positions. Once positioned, the final carving could begin. A process of subtraction revealed the divine figure from raw quartzite. The man immortalized in these 2 colossal statues was a real and incredibly powerful ruler, Pharaoh Amenhotep III. He reigned during the 18th dynasty, the golden age of ancient Egypt. His reign brought remarkable stability, unprecedented prosperity, and breathtaking artistic achievement. He was the greatest builder of his age. His construction projects were vast and numerous, transforming the landscape of Egypt. The most ambitious of all Amenhotep III's projects was his own mortuary temple. It was a place where Amenhotep III, the living man, could merge with his own divine image and be worshipped as a god on earth. Their purpose was to announce the divine nature of the temple's owner and to magically protect the sacred precinct that lay behind them. They were the eternal watchers at the threshold of the pharaoh's heavenly mansion. The colossi of Memnon have endured more than just the passage of 3 millennia. They've survived centuries of natural disasters and human interference. Later pharaohs and Roman builders plundered the site. The annual flooding of the Nile River was a relentless enemy to the monuments on the floodplain. For centuries, folks believed the Grand Mortuary Temple was lost forever. But since 1998, a dedicated team of archaeologists has been working to uncover the secrets buried beneath the soil. The most exciting discoveries have been the hundreds of statues and statue fragments that have been pulled from the mud, especially the lioness-headed goddess Sekhmet. In a remarkable effort, they've lifted and restored several other colossal statues, placing them back in their original positions. The lost temple is slowly and honestly, quite magically, rising from the earth once more. Long after the Roman pilgrims had departed, the colossi continued to exert a powerful pull on the human imagination, portraying them as sublime, melancholic figures brooding over a lost golden age. Today, millions of tourists from every corner of the globe make the journey to stand at their feet. Their silhouettes at sunrise have become a defining visual of a trip to Luxor. They have been oracles, landmarks, romantic ruins, and scientific treasures. They have watched over the land as beliefs, languages, and empires have turned to dust around them. The colossi of Memnon are more than just stone and more than just history. They are a vital part of our shared human heritage. Silent sentinels watching over the eternal dawn of civilization. Their mystery and majesty an enduring gift to the world. They will continue to inspire awe and wonder for as long as they stand. If you look closer, the colossi of Memnon have even more secrets to share, some only revealed in recent years. Once, these giants were not the sun-bleached sandstone we see today. Traces of vibrant pigments suggest their surfaces gleamed with colour. Deep reds, ochres, hints of blue, hints of green. Imagine sunlight dancing on painted crowns, royal regalia, transforming the statues into dazzling guardians of the temple. Centuries of visitors have left their own marks on these ancient titans. Greek travellers, Roman travellers carved their names and messages into the stone. These ancient graffitis still whisper stories of distant lands and long-forgotten hopes, etched for eternity at the feet of pharaohs. Today, the colossi stand at the crossroads of past and future. Conservators, scientists protect them from erosion, pollution, the relentless march of time. 3D scanning, seismic monitoring experts peering inside the stone, mapping hidden cracks, mapping subtle shifts that could threaten their stability. Each scan helps preserve a digital replica, safeguarding their likeness even as the originals age. Recent discoveries continue to surprise. New fragments, once believed lost, have surfaced, adding missing pieces to the puzzle of the mortuary temple. Were there once matching statues to the north and south? Could undiscovered chambers lie beneath the sand? Modern tourists gaze up in wonder, becoming part of the Colosse's living story, one still unfolding, layer by layer in the Egyptian sun. The silent sentinels endure as ever-evolving witnesses to the dreams and questions of every new generation. Few know that these ancient guardians may have served as celestial markers. Some researchers believe the statues were aligned to greet the rising sun at solstice, their massive forms casting long shadows that tracked the passage of time. Inscriptions found nearby hint at rituals performed at dawn priests, invoking the power of the gods as sunlight touched the stone faces. Were the colossi silent astronomers watching the heavens as well as the Nile? In recent years, restoration efforts have sparked passionate controversy. Advanced cleaning techniques promise to revive lost details, but some experts warned, could aggressive methods erase precious traces of pigment or ancient tool marks? A delicate balance emerged, preserving the statues for the future without silencing their past. Modern technology is peeling back layers of mystery. Meanwhile, microanalysis of the sandstone has traced its origins to distant quarries, raising new questions about the logistics and labor behind their creation. Perhaps most surprising, scientists have uncovered evidence that the Colosse's voices might not be entirely silent today. Under certain conditions, as the desert cools at dawn, faint vibrations have been recorded, echoes of the ancient singing phenomenon, now understood as a rare interplay of temperature, stone and air. Each discovery deepens our fascination. The Colossi of Memnon remain not just relics, but partners in a timeless dialogue. As the sun rises over the Theban plain, the Colossi of Memnon stand not only as sentinels of Egypt's ancient past, but as treasures cherished by all humanity. Today, these monumental figures are protected as part of the Theban necropolis, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its unparalleled historical and cultural significance. This prestigious status brings the eyes of the world to Luxor, and with them a global commitment to preservation. International experts, local artisans and passionate volunteers unite under the blue and white banner of UNESCO, working tirelessly to conserve not just the Colossi, but the entire necropolis, home to the Valley of the Kings, the Valley of the Queens, temples, tombs. Sweeping aerial views reveal the scale of this sacred landscape, while close-ups show careful hands at work, restoring weathered stone, monitoring environmental changes, and ensuring that every detail is protected for generations yet to come. UNESCO plaques stand as silent promises, reminders that the story of the Colossi of ancient Egypt itself belongs to people everywhere. Through global stewardship and shared pride, the Colossi of Memnon endure. Their shadows stretch into the future, icons of resilience, memory and hope. In safeguarding these giants, we honor the dreams of the past and inspire the promise of tomorrow. Long before the modern world recognized the Colossi of Memnon as a universal heritage, these monumental statues captivated the imaginations of distant civilizations. Among the most enchanted were the ancient Greeks, travelers, scholars, and adventurers. Through the eyes of Greek visitors, the Colossi became more than silent sentinels. They were transformed into legends. Greek historians, poets, and explorers like Strabo and Pausanias recorded their awe in vivid detail. Some arrived at dawn hoping to hear the mysterious singing of the northern statue. They believed it was the voice of Memnon, son of Eos, goddess of the dawn, greeting his mother with a mournful melody at sunrise. Manuscripts and ancient sketches reveal Greek artists trying to capture the statue's grandeur. Charcoal strokes tracing enigmatic features that seem both familiar and otherworldly. Greek myths blended with Egyptian history, weaving new stories around the Colossi. Tales of Memnon as a tragic hero of the Trojan War, his spirit lingering in stone, bridging two great cultures. This fascination sparked exchanges of art, language and belief. Greek and Egyptian craftsmen shared techniques, and Hellenistic motifs began to appear in local art. The colossi featured in Greek writings, inspiring generations of artists and thinkers, echoing through the centuries as symbols of mystery and connection. Statues bathed in golden light, we see them anew, not just as Egyptian marvels, but as beacons that once drew the curious and the wise from across the ancient world. In their silent watch, the colossi of Memnon remind us of the timeless human quest, to seek, to wonder, to share in the marvels of our past.